Hi, caregivers. I'm Donna Jackson, the Adult Caregivers Coach, and this is the Curated Caregiver. On our podcast, you guys know we bring in experts to just, educate us, encourage us, and give us real-time excerpts from their lives in any area of caregiving that you might encounter on your individual caregiving journey. Today, our segment is entitled The Backside of the Blessing, Transforming Caregiver Despair into Life Purpose. And today we have an expert who has done just that during her caregiving journey. Shewonia Roberts is with us today, who is a visionary in end-of-life planning. And she's on a mission to help people shift their perspectives on loss and dying. And she's here to share not only her story with us, but real nuggets, real gems on what we can do if we find ourselves in similar situations on our journeys. So welcome, Shewonia.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here and with your caregiving community.
Yes. So, Shewonia, take us through your journey. There's so many things that we can, and so many ways that we can kind of go about this discussion. But your story is so powerful. It's such a powerful story of resilience during caregiving. And it touches on so many things and so many aspects of the family dynamic as it relates to potentially what many caregivers experience. And I want them to see what this looks like in real time, based on your journey and what has come from it as a result.
Absolutely. So before I tell my story in the background, I just want to share with your guests and you one of the things that a friend of mine who hosts a podcast as well opens with is the Serenity Prayer. And it is something that grounds me daily as I think about caregiving, as I just think about day-to-day life. And I want to share that with your audience, but I also want to wrap it around kind of this process. It says, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. And what we mean by serenity is just to be at peace with this process and to reflect. Because the reality is, we know we will age, we know that we will grow older, and we know that we will transition. So we have to accept the things that we cannot change. But in that, we have to have the courage. And what I mean by that is it takes a tremendous amount of strength to document and think about where my life will be 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, and how I want to live and to plan for that. It takes a lot of courage to also have a conversation with your loved ones to say, this is my plan. I am sharing it with you. These are my wishes. And the last one is wisdom. It is about being thoughtful and intentional about writing your plans down and thinking through them. It is also the gift that you can give your loved ones. So we have serenity, courage, and wisdom. And a famous artist that I really love, India Arie, actually has a song. She calls it Strength, Courage, and Wisdom. But all of those things and having the strength and willpower are the ingredients that you need to think about as you are legacy succession planning. But it's also about securing your dynasty and your wishes and ensuring that your loved ones have your plans and visions. So a little bit about me. I'm a parent. I have 2 kids. I have 2 daughters, 2 wonderful daughters. And it's ironic because when I look at them, I see bits and pieces of me, their mannerisms, the way they talk, how they address and handle and manage things, but most importantly, that they're just living their lives and not the life that I want them to live. but the life that they want to live for themselves. So it feels good, it fuels my soul, and it just gives me so much joy. So about 26 years ago, yes, I have a 26-year-old daughter. I learned that I was going to be a parent. I was going to be a mother. And I started doing all the things and planning for the arrival of the child, planning for the arrival to bring life into this world. I got the room ready. I got all the equipment that I needed for my car, for his and her car. I looked at schools. I found a pediatrician. I built a birth plan. Like, do I want to have a cesarean? Do I want to have a live birth? Do I want to have a doula? What do I want to do after birth with the placenta, cutting the cord? Like, so all of these things, because I knew I was bringing life into this. I even read a book, What to Expect When You're Expecting, just so that I am ready. What I didn't realize at that time, and you had asked me about this going backwards to look forward and your purpose and your passion, is that those things were a gift. They were a gift to me so that when the arrival of my child came, I was better prepared. You're not going to be prepared for everything. You can't control everything, but to some degree, you had some things under control. But it was also a gift for my child. Bringing her into the world, we were expecting her, and this is going to be home for her, and I made it her home. So I want people to think about this. Like, I started back, the serenity to accept the things you cannot change. We bring life into this world and we transition out of this world. So why aren't we planning for the transitioning out of the world the same way we plan transitioning into the world? So my birth planning was a welcoming for everyone. My life succession planning is my transition out of the world, but it is my parting gift to my loved ones. So I want to tell you my story. In 2018, my father had a severe asthma attack. And he actually was in the ICU for about 10 days. I flew home. I spent the entire time with my father to help my mother, but also manage the care. What I learned in that moment, because my mother and I stayed in the hospital, my mother kept asking me the same questions. I need to get the key to the hotel to go to the room. And we were at the hospital. What time is it? What day is it? And I began to wonder, and I'm thinking, this doesn't sound right. My siblings had said, she's just stressed. Dad's in the hospital. This is normal. She's just stressed. So since I was at a hospital, I said, let me just have this checked out. Let me go see if there's someone on staff that could just examine my mother and just tell me if everything's okay. So sure enough, we took her in, they did some scans, they did the tests, and they said she's showing signs of cognitive decline. Mild signs would ultimately lead to dementia. So here I am, my dad's in ICU. I'm with my mother. We find out that she's showing mild signs of dementia, cognitive decline. I am at my wit's end. My very, very dear friend who's an attorney said, Shewonia, you need to start getting some things in order. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, what? She said, you should probably get a power of attorney so that you can manage your mother and your father's care, or someone can manage their care. And I was like, what? Are you serious? Like, okay, so I'm literally sitting on the floor of the hospital with my computer. I am in LegalZoom.com. I take articles from this, and I build the power of attorney for my mother and my father. I just needed one document. Usually you do two. You do the medical and you do the financial. But I knew my parents probably would only sign one document. So I did them combined. I am the second of four. I live the furthest away. So I asked one of my siblings if they would do it in order to just manage things very quickly. They had indicated we all should do it. And I was four of us. And I said, that's probably not the best idea. We need to make decisions. It needs to be quick, in a hurry. To get all of us to agree is probably not the best idea. So we have a co-power attorney. So my dad gets out in 10 days. He goes through therapy. I fly back home to where I live. Fast forward to 2019, my father passes away. I was really resistant to my parents aging. I was resistant to them dying. My mother is still with me. But in that moment, I had an opportunity to talk to them about their affairs. I had an opportunity to ask them questions. And again, starting with the serenity prayer, I did not have the courage because I didn't want to talk about it. I was scared. They were scared. And it was just a difficult conversation. So he passes away. My mother has dementia, and I am at a loss to their affairs, their financial affairs, their legal affairs, their just all of the things involved. They both had cell phones. I didn't know who the providers were so that I could call and cancel because my mother didn't need her phone, and definitely my father did not need his. I didn't know who their gas and like all of the things that I needed to care for. I didn't know if they paid bills that came out automatically. I didn't know. So I'm literally combing through the file cabinets, looking at mail, asking people who's the neighborhood, who does the gas in the area, even the garbage pickup, like all of these things that you don't even think about in the midst of things that you manage on a day-to-day basis. But if you had to care for someone, you then would have to manage those things. We got through it, but your title resonates with me, particularly because my father passed away, and what he gave me put me on this path for my purpose and passion. And that is truly communicating to everyone that I know that we know better, we do better. And we have to have the strength and the courage to have conversations about our legacy succession planning. I believe, and I truly believe this, the greatest parting gift that we could give to our loved ones is a peace of mind. And we do that by telling our story and documenting our plans.
That is something, so much in there. I want to pull a couple of things out. What would you tell the caregiver who was like you, Shewonia, and wasn't willing or able to have the courageous conversations? What would you tell them are some fallacies that we believe are going to happen if we just kind of don't do anything, like kind of avoid it,
Right.
Avoid the planning. Mm-hmm.
Right. So one of the things that people truly believe is that if I talk about it, we're putting it out in the atmosphere and it's going to come. Now, I can't say that's true or not true. What I can say is having the conversation allows you to have peace of mind. Having the conversation allows you to execute to their wishes. My father passed away. We didn't have a conversation. I didn't know what suit, like all of these little bitty things. His handcuffs, his hats. Where do you want them to go? Your brother, your son, like how do we manage these things? And people don't understand that puts a lot of stress on the people that are planning for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the one thing I would say is a bite-sized conversation. It's not something you do all at once. Like you may be having dinner and you notice that he's wearing or she's wearing something and you say, that's really great. I really love that. Mom, dad, aunt, uncle, sister, or brother. Do you know where you want that to go if anything were to happen to you? Like it's just a random conversation during day-to-day things. And then even if they're calling you and you're talking about your phone, oh, by the way, who's your cell phone provider? Who's your carrier? So it's not sitting down and say, okay, when you die, what are we going to do? No, it is really just a general conversation about as things go. Hey, mama, are you and dad both on the deed to the house?
Mm-hmm.
Like those types of things. And then you just check things off. You check things off. But I've also created a guide to also help people just think through in sections on how to prompt people, what to capture, what to do.
Yeah.
But I do believe that it is the people that we leave behind that will have to struggle the most. Not only are they grieving, but just putting it all together, your affairs, is going to be a challenge for them as well.
Yes, yes. And so a couple of things there. And thank you, Shewonia. You guys, you can hear in her voice, and if you're watching, you can see the emotion that still comes up. And you don't know when that emotion is going to come back up. You can't plan for that.
Right.
But that's real. That's a part of the grieving process for the rest of our lives after we lose a parent or a loved one. There are theories and books and things out there that tell us the proper time to grieve and all those things. It is as individual as each of us on this planet is in terms of how we go through that process. Now, there are certain milestones that you want to reach in a certain amount of time, give or take, but it's not prescriptive, guys. So, and just thank you for the vulnerability, because that's what that's what we're sharing here, as we want to just, bring this to caregivers who are in the throes of caregiving right now. And I also wanted to go back, guys, because no, Shewonia did not give her dad handcuffs. She was getting his cufflinks. That's what you said. You said.
Did I say that? Okay, thank you.
To make sure.
Yeah.
But I knew what you meant. And so, this is, and the beautiful segue that you made right there was actually where I was going to go with it. So let's stay there.
Okay.
Is what would you tell caregivers who are not organized? They don't think this way. There are a lot of people in these spaces who are type A individuals. And so our minds naturally go this way, like plan and prepare. But as you and I know, and many others, there's an overwhelming majority of people who don't think that way, or who think somebody else is going to do it.
Right.
And so tell us about the guidebook that you prepared.
So, like I mentioned, my father passes away. My mother has cognitive decline. So she was not able to help us just better understand the affairs, to make sure that everything was in her name and left to her. But at the same time, we then had to make sure that if anything happened to her, someone of her 4 kids were listed as beneficiaries or payment on death or whatever the process is. Yeah. So I started documenting all of the things that I had to do. And I talked about just the bills. When you think about it, just think about what you do every day in terms of what you pay. Think about your financial situation. You pay your bills, your mortgage, your rent, your car note, your insurance. You have subscriptions, your Netflix, Amazon, any of these other things. But people need to know that, is it an automatic withdrawal? And if so, which account? Because they need to know that I need to cancel these things, or I need to move it somewhere else so that we can pay for them separately, or I need to shut them off. The other thing is, again, think about your day-to-day life, this device. Do you want people to have access to this device so that they can contact? If so, what's your access to your phone, your computer, your digital life? Not only that, your social media life. Do you want them to be able to go in and close your Facebook account, your Insta, your X account, whatever, your LinkedIn, whatever those social media platforms may be? In order for them to do that, they need access. And so I walked through this journey just thinking about the things that I would do. And then I started to share this with my friends, and they were like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think about that. Nobody talks about this. It's just like, we know that there's a service. We know that we get the obituary. We know we invite people who found the church, like these things that we know, but it is open the door and behind the scenes things that we tend to forget. And we feel like we will be able to piece it together after, but we can't, because you need those people to give you that information. I often quote from Hamilton, the Broadway musical. There's a song in there that said, "He who lives, who dies, who tells your story. It is the person that lives that is going to tell your story." So you have to give them something to say. You have to tell people. And when I tell people this story, I fly a lot. I have American Airlines points, but my kids wouldn't know that. Like, how would they know this? Mm-hmm. They need access to this. And I want them to transfer every point. I need them to get all my miles and use them for themselves. My Bonvoy Marriott, the same thing. Like all of these things, you think about what you have
Mhm.
think about what they have, and start to chronicle them. But I will ask you to do them in 4 categories. And you have to decide which of those 4 you start with. Is it the legal aspects? Your will, trust, your power of attorney, your do not resuscitate. Do you have those documents in place? I would start there at the legal. Because if you're caring for someone and they are unable to speak for themselves, they need to give you the power of attorney to manage their affairs. If they are going through a change of life, you need to know, should you resuscitate them, or do they wish that they just do not do anything and let me go? You need to have these conversations with them. The other piece I would say is your financials. Again, that's your everything that you pay, your insurance, your 401k, your pensions, your military, like whatever you have that's coming, your rental properties, your businesses, whatever that is, your credit cards, your checking accounts, your savings account, your investment accounts, whatever those things are, what bills that you pay, what's in your name, what's in someone else's name, then you start to do those things. Your medical, because you are caring for someone, your loved ones need to know who your physicians are. But nowadays, you have a portal for that. They need access to the portal. Schedule appointments to see your medical files and test results. So you have to write them down and document them. The last thing I call is just your information, who to call in the event that something happens to me. My friends, my neighbors, the church, the organizations that I'm in, if I'm still working, my employer, people that I work with, the neighbor down the street, organizations, like who are my contact people should something happen to me, who to reach out to, or if you're looking for me and you need to find me, who are the people that are kind of in my neighborhood, so to say. So the book outlines and chronicles those things. The last thing that I will say is writing your story. We often, I tell people, I started teaching my daughter how to drive last summer. And it never dawned on me that I don't know how my parents learned how to drive. Like, and my mother and dad, we just never talked about it. So I share with my daughter my driving experience. I also don't know if my kids knew that my mother was my first grade teacher. And I had to go through, yeah, exactly. I had to go through school not saying mother, I had to say Miss Roberts. And because we didn't want anybody to know that it was my mother and I was getting parental treatment. Like it was the whole thing. And that went on for 2 years. So I slipped up my 3rd grade and said mom one day, and everybody looked, that's your mother? Yeah. So it was a real thing. So a part of the book is just writing those stories that changed the trajectory of your life, or that made a difference in your life, or the stories that you want to pass on for generation to generation to generation. So that's how I would instruct people to think about it.
Yeah.
But also there are tools out there that are available to help you compartmentalize where to start, what to capture, and what to do.
Yeah. Wow. So good. This is, earlier on you talked, and I have to mention this. There's no way that you look like you have a 26-year-old. So I know everybody who is watching is saying the same thing. When you said that earlier, I was like, no way.
Yes, yes.
But you also mentioned wisdom. And I've heard it said that wisdom is doing now what you'll be happy with later.
Yeah.
So this is what you're talking about, planning. And, one of the programs that I run is coaching caregivers in this space. And one of the hardest things that we have to kind of dismantle, right, is getting from knowing that you have to do something, right, to actually implementing it.
Right.
Now, in your mind, that's very linear. You say, okay, I need to do this, and this is what it's going to result in.
Exactly. Yes.
But one of the things that is critical, and where we spend most of our time in our coaching sessions, are on the obstacles that come in between the decision to do it and actually being able to implement it. So can you talk to us about some obstacles that can happen between and your guide is amazing. And caregivers, I am going to be posting a link to the guide, so you'll be able to get this guide. Please get it. It is so helpful. It is purposeful. This is the parting gift that Shewonia mentioned, that we want to leave in our succession plan, that chronicles our lives, if you will, right? And all the details needed so that those who will be honoring us in the end of our days will have that peace of mind that Shewonia talked about, because there's going to be grieving. And to have to do all of these things on top of the grieving, that is where you see a lot of the uh, the prolonged grieving period, because a lot of times some folks are not able to grieve properly because there's so many administrative things that have to be taken care of still. And this could be months, sometimes years after your loved one has passed. So, Shewonia, what are some of those obstacles that you might kind of walk us through?
Absolutely. Before I start there, I just would like your audience just to think about the first time that you've experienced death.
Mm.
Think about how you felt. Think about how the loved ones around you felt. Think about what you saw. Think about the person who was grieving, how they felt, how you think they felt.
Yeah.
Because it's important to not only have empathy, but really be in that mindset. So one of the obstacles is the mindset, because we believe that there is a certain time that this thing is going to happen. But we have to realize that we don't know the time. It could happen at any time. We also need to be mindful of the people that we leave behind. How are they feeling in that moment? That's when I talked about giving them a peace of mind, being at peace. I've experienced both spectrums, where the person that passed away had a plan, they had a conversation, their loved ones knew exactly their wishes, what dress, what song, what hymn, like all the things. Here's my documents, here's who you call to get this, and this. So that loved one was able to just sit and grieve and just think about the memories. Yes. Not having to manage all of these other things and be mired with all of these things to do because there was no plan.
Right.
The other side of the spectrum is that family members are fighting. Well, she wanted me to have it. She told me I'm going to get it. There's no will, so we have to go to probate court and spend additional money where we could have been pulling it together and keeping it. So you have to think about where in that paradigm you want to be and you want your loved ones to be. I know this takes time. I have been managing my parents' affair, and it wasn't until last year that I think I've captured everything that I think. I don't want my daughters to have to do that. I don't want them to have to think about 2 years or 3 years after my passing. I'm still trying to figure out where my mom had this. No, I want them to be able to celebrate my life and be at peace with my passing and still live their best lives. So that's the other obstacle that I think people have. Yeah, is my mindset. It's 80. I'm going to be 80. It's also my time that I don't have time, or I don't know, I don't have the guidance to do this or the tools, or I'm not equipped. The last thing is, and we talked about this at the beginning, the courage. We celebrate when we bring life into this world. And I started the conversation of talking about birth. It's that circle of life. You know, there's this saying, I only got to pay taxes and die. Like, these are the things. So we know we're going to die. Yeah. Let's have a conversation about planning for it. Right? It's just like when you buy car insurance, you're not looking to have an accident. But if you do, you have this behind you. We know we're going to die.
Yeah.
So this insurance, this legacy succession planning is your plan to put it together. So everything else that happens, just think about that. Everything else that happens. I don't know if I'm gonna have a car accident, but I have a car. I don't know if I'm gonna have a medical emergency, but I have medical insurance. We do all of these other things, but you know that you're going to transition. Let's plan for it. Let's have a conversation about it.
Yeah. Yeah, it is so true. I've another thing I've heard said, and I've said it many times on these podcasts, to avoid the inevitable is to be naive.
Yes,
It's inevitable.
I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I know we're coming to time, but
Already?
yeah, this is because these types of discussions are they're so meaningful. They're chock full of so many little things that the listeners can kind of pull that thread. They can just, grab onto just one thing that you've said. Like if there's just one thing, if they implement one thing that you've said, they are well on their way to, okay, next.
Absolutely.
And I hear you saying, when you said, a lot of people are like, well, I'm not qualified to do this. I'm not qualified to do that. I don't even know how to do that. I don't have any money to get an attorney to do all these things. If you guys were listening, you heard Shewonia say she didn't. She went on Google, LegalZoom.com, put in the request, the question in these browsers. And there's tons of information out there. This podcast is one of them. This is why we do these, so that we can disseminate this information. It's free, but you have to at least, do that part, do your part, which is look for it, seek it. One of the things that you were saying made me think of the challenges, and I thought that's what I was thinking when you talked about the mindset. I think that's our number one obstacle, right?
100%.
Is tradition, what we've been taught, what we learned and what we didn't learn, all of those things, what we've been exposed to and what we haven't been exposed to. All of those things form our mindset. And something that you talked about, I wanted to dive in here.
Okay.
Which is the state of the family when we get to this season, right? And talk to us about what the state of any given family may be at any time, but particularly in this season when there's siblings involved and we now have to come together and care for our parents, our grandparents, and what you suggest, how you would approach, and what you would tell our caregivers about this specific familial dynamic.
No, absolutely. I can share with the listeners that it was not an easy road for me and my siblings. A friend of mine would always say, I'm the Michael. If you think about the Jackson 5, there's that one person in the family that is going to own and manage. There's one person in the family that everybody believes that person should do the job, at least 80% of it, and they take the 20. And so that becomes very challenging for that one person, but also demanding emotionally, physically, mentally, all of those things. That's why it's important to have these conversations prior so that you can divide and conquer and everybody understands their role. The other thing, I think that this can literally rip families apart because it's the infighting. What I talked about earlier, mom said I should get this, but no, dad told me I'm going to do this. When your wishes are clear, when they are written down and they are legally documented, then everybody understands. I even had a friend who said, I know this person is going to say, well, Shewonia said I was going to have this. Just write in your will. I'll give her $5. Like, or whatever it is, so that if they come to your family and say and challenge that, no, you're in here. This is what she said you should have, or he said you should have, or whatever the conversation is. This is a celebration, again, a celebration of life, a celebration of transitioning. And we don't want this experience to rip the family apart, because you have to think about your loved ones. They want you to come together and continue to build upon their legacy and continue to share out their journey. And when you have these obstacles, when you have these barriers in the family dynamic, it could break you apart. And then family members don't come back together. And that's not what your loved ones would have wanted to have happen. And that's why these courageous conversations are important, to drive these conversations, to drive the understanding, but also to drive the people that you're caring for to document, but also think about your own life. You should be documenting your plans and your wishes and communicating that to everyone.
Oh, absolutely. You know, and many times it's the patriarch or the matriarch of those of that family who is the glue.
Yes.
They're the glue. So
Yes.
to your point, when they transition, there's nothing holding us together.
Exactly.
Blood siblings, there's nothing holding us together. And guess what? We all know they would hate this. They would
100%.
hate that we're fighting this way, you know.
Yes.
So
someone still has to lead the family through the traditions, the holiday dinners, the holiday celebrations, the anniversaries, things of that nature, and pass that down so that it's not only enjoyment and fulfillment for you, but your loved ones, your cousins, your aunts, your uncles, just your family in general.
Yeah.
You don't want to see that be ripped apart.
That's right. That's right. You know, there's so many similarities to your caregiving story, Shewonia, and the caregiving story of myself and my siblings. So much. It's just, it's encouraging though to know that sometimes, even if things are not perfect, and you know, in the end, when those parents transition, that there's someone who is attempting to get things together, right? And that everybody hasn't just thrown their hands up and like, well, whatever, I'm out, and that kind of attitude, especially when there are grandchildren and great grandchildren who are there, who remain and loved their grandmother and great grandmother and great grandfather and things like that. I wanted to end on this, pull it out a little bit more of the complex family dynamics. And, you know, I know lots of folks who, after parents and grandparents die, they're, the siblings, they're in lawsuits, they're suing each other.
Yes.
Over things. And you want to see some anger and resentment. A lot of this stuff is carried out in family courts, these types of cases. And it's so sad. It's so sad. But what I recognize, a lot of them are caused or happen because there was these unresolved issues from childhood, guys.
Wow.
Childhood.
Yeah.
Okay? And that's the thing is, even though, you know, this segment, we're talking about preparing for transitioning. Not only the elderly loved ones we're caring for, but ourselves and even our legacy, letting them know this is how you do this. Shewonia was just saying, just even a casual conversation, that's how you do it. So it doesn't feel so daunting. It doesn't feel scary to say, hey mom, what's your favorite gospel song?
Right.
Or it doesn't even have to be a gospel song. What is your favorite song? And if it is, a very worldly song, guess what? That's her homegoing.
Right.
And we're going to play it. If that's her song, but to know certain little things, and asking them at times when it would naturally come into the conversation, not a forced conversation, and not one that's very rigid and okay, all right, today we're going to have this talk and we're going to talk
Right.
about that.
Right.
Yeah, nobody wants that. But if you are mindful, just again, leaning in or even finding out how to employ some organizational skills to even do that. Maybe you say once a month, say you talk to them once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week, maybe once a month. I'm going to slip this question in.
Right.
And get this, and just incrementally, like Shewonia mentioned. But I want to possibly end on this one.
Okay.
In preparing, like you have, and even creating the guide that you created for us, what would you say to even getting there? Because at some point, the siblings have to allow that sibling to do this.
Right.
You can do it, but are they going to participate? Are
Right.
they going to participate? And you mentioned earlier that, in powers of attorney, there are positions, right? We know that you can have first, second, third, however many positions, and even an agreement on who's going to be in what position. Or like Shewonia mentioned, that you split up the tasks, and some person is really good with the money, and then the other person is really good with taking care of everything that has to do with the house, the cars, and just splitting things up.
Yep.
Those types of things. How have you seen that actually play out when there were unhealed relations from childhood, which rear its ugly head now? Because guess what? This is still mom and dad,
Right.
and we are still in the pecking order that we were born. We're still in
Right.
that pecking order. And oh, you were mom's favorite anyway. I'm not listening to you, and you think you know everything. Like, how can you help us in that space?
So that's a really good point and question. But to the caregivers out there, I want to say this. I want to make sure that you're caring for yourself, your mental state, your physical state, your emotional state. I also want you to not listen to the noise out there. She should do this, he should do that. I don't understand why this is happening. You have to do what's best for you and that makes sense for you and your family, because you are also managing the process and you have to care for yourself. So here's what I've seen and experienced. There's that one person that owns and manages the entire ecosystem of this process. I have seen families, like you said, that have been able to break up and divide and conquer, but that has been a rarity in terms of the process. And when I see families and listen to families like that, I'm like, well, how did you guys do it? And like you said, if there was someone who was very organized, they managed, the paperwork. If there's someone that is the social person, they made sure that the person that they're being cared for was being engaged mentally, emotionally, doing activities. And then if there was someone who was out of town, that person would come in for the holidays and be responsible for those types of things. And literally, that is the outcome that you would want. And that's where you would want to be. And that's how you want to get, that's where you want to be. Because it is taxing for that one person that is managing everything and doing everything for them. It's exhausting. Mm-hmm. And then the comments that they get, well, you should do this, you should have done that. It also plays into their psyche. And that's not something that you want to have happen. You need to just not listen to that. But it is, every family situation is different, and you're right. It is those experience and that core, how you grew up and how you managed and handled things, still surfacing as adults. And you have to find a way to work through that and do what's in the best interest of the person being cared for. And really just having conversations and laying it all out while everyone is still here. It's extremely difficult. And like I shared with you, I was the Michael. I didn't want to be the Michael, but I also felt like I didn't want my parents' legacy to be left to the courts to handle and manage. Wow. I also felt that my parents worked hard for every penny, dime, nickel that they had. I didn't want that to go to anyone else but their legacy. So I rolled up my sleeves and said, okay, I'll do it. Wow. But that is not how you would want that situation to be.
Well, Shewonia, thank you so much. This has been really good. I know that our caregivers will really be able to take several things that we talked about today and, start to implement them today, or put a plan in place to begin implementing them as soon as they can.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I do want to just really share the book out again. I talked about this when I was doing this. When my father passed away, I began to think about my children. This is my passion and purpose. And one of the things, when my father transitioned, he put me on this path so that I could talk to everyone else. It is a living journal for you to start thinking about, in those sections that I talk about, what to document, what to chronicle, what to ask for, what do you need. So this is a great starting point to help you on that journey.
Yes. Now, is it a workbook, or so that you can write in it?
It is a workbook, so you can write in it. Yes. So it allows you to, I don't know if that light comes out, it allows you to document things so that you have it. And I mean, it even goes into your advanced care planning at the time of your passing, what scripture, like you talked about the hymn, the song, it allows you to think through things that you wouldn't normally think about.
Yeah.
What do I need others to know in the event that something happens to me? But people need to realize too, it's not just when you transition from this world. It's also if anything happens and you're incapacitated and someone needs to temporarily care for you, they still need to know the things about you.
That's right. Your wishes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. And so I know we're at time, but this has been really great. One of the modules that I coach is called Every Caregiver Needs a Coach. Because there are lots of things that you just don't know. And even to the point that we talked about earlier, with Shewonia's amazing guide, Before I Die, where everything is just there. You don't even have to think. She has thought of everything. She has incorporated, decades of experience in this space into this journal, this guide. But sometimes it's that mindset that needs a little work. And so I'm going to also drop in the links to this podcast, the link to Shewonia's guide, Before I Die by Shewonia Roberts. And I'm also going to drop links to my coaching program and to my my age-to-age services for caregivers who are fatigued or even burnt out and need a bit of respite. So you'll be able to find those below in the write-up to this podcast. Well, with that, Shewonia, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I look forward to, just following you and all the things that you'll be doing as a build out to what you've already done here. Is there anything you'd like to share with our listeners in addition to your guide that you're working on, or just any parting words?
So I do want to say again, I truly believe the greatest parting gift that you can leave your loved ones is a peace of mind. And that is you sitting back and thinking about your life in 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. How do I want to live? But more importantly, the things that I have, my assets, where do I want them to go and reside? We have to think about legacy succession planning as a means to having your dynasty live on forever and ever and ever and ever. And the way to do that is to document it, to get your legal affairs in order. And I want you to be comfortable not accomplishing this in a week, 2 weeks, or even a month. As long as you are documenting it over time, you will get it done. Don't put that pressure on yourself that I need to do all of this in one day, in one sitting. It is over a length of time and a period. But I wish you well. I know there are things that we don't want to talk about, and death is one of those. But like I said, who lives, who dies, who tells your story? It is that person that lives that's going to tell your story, but you need to give them something to say.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.